Sarah Martinez never expected her morning coffee break to change everything. She worked as a junior systems analyst at Griffin Technologies, a mid-tier defense contractor tucked away in an industrial complex outside Denver. The company specialized in communications equipment for military bases, nothing too glamorous or top secret. Sarah's job involved routine maintenance of their internal network systems, debugging software glitches, and occasionally updating security protocols. On that particular Tuesday morning in March, Sarah discovered something peculiar while reviewing the employee access database. Her own keycard, labeled HX-9, had been flagged with an unusual designation she'd never seen before. Instead of the standard Level 2 general access that matched her clearance level, the system showed HX-9, experimental authorization pending. Sarah laughed it off as another one of Griffin's infamous administrative errors. The company was notorious among employees for its outdated computer systems and frequent clerical mistakes. Just last month, the payroll department had accidentally listed the janitor as the chief technology officer for 2 weeks. Sarah's colleague Mike had been locked out of his own office for 3 days because someone entered his badge number incorrectly into the system. "Hey Mike, look at this," Sarah called over to her cubicle neighbor, pointing at her computer screen. "Apparently I'm some kind of experimental test subject now. Think they're going to use me for alien experiments?" Mike rolled his eyes and chuckled. Knowing this place, they probably meant to give that clearance to someone in R&D and accidentally assigned it to you instead. Remember when they sent all those classified memos about Project Nightingale to the cafeteria staff? Sarah shook her head, amused by the company's consistent incompetence. She made a mental note to contact IT support after lunch to get the error corrected. The last thing she needed was some security audit flagging her for having incorrect access permissions. During her lunch break, Sarah walked through the main corridor toward the cafeteria. Her route took her past several restricted areas she'd never paid much attention to before. These were the zones where the real work happened, where engineers developed new communication systems for military contracts. Sarah had always been curious about what went on behind those unmarked doors, but her clearance level never granted her access. As she passed one particular door marked only with a small sign reading, Laboratory Wing C, Sarah's keycard suddenly beeped. The electronic lock disengaged with a soft click, and the heavy steel door swung open slightly. Sarah froze, looking around to see if anyone had noticed. The hallway was empty except for the distant hum of ventilation systems. Her first instinct was to pull the door shut and walk away quickly. Getting caught in a restricted area could cost her job, especially given Griffin's strict security policies. But curiosity got the better of her. Sarah glanced around once more, then pushed the door open just enough to peer inside. What she saw made her breath catch. The laboratory was unlike anything she'd expected to find at Griffin Technologies. Instead of the typical cluttered workspace, filled with circuit boards and computer terminals, this room contained sophisticated equipment that looked decades ahead of anything she'd seen before. Holographic displays flickered with complex data streams, and sleek metallic devices hummed quietly on pristine white workbenches. In the center of the room stood a large cylindrical device about the size of a telephone booth, covered in blinking lights and touchscreens. Sarah recognized some of the symbols on the displays as military communication protocols, but others were completely foreign to her. The entire setup looked more like something from a science fiction movie than a typical defense contractor's laboratory. Sarah realized she was holding her breath. She carefully backed out of the room and let the door close behind her, her mind racing with questions. How had her keycard gained access to such an advanced facility? What kind of projects was Griffin really working on? And why did that equipment look so far beyond anything she'd encountered in her 5 years at the company? The rest of her lunch break passed in a blur. Sarah mechanically ate her sandwich while her thoughts churned with possibilities. Maybe Griffin wasn't the small-time contractor she'd always assumed it was. Maybe there were layers to this company that regular employees never saw. Or maybe this was all just another administrative error, albeit a much more serious one. Back at her desk, Sarah tried to focus on her afternoon tasks, but concentration proved impossible. Every few minutes, she found herself glancing toward the restricted wing, wondering what other secrets might be hidden behind those unmarked doors. Her HX-9 keycard sat on her desk like a small plastic mystery, innocent-looking but apparently more powerful than she'd ever imagined. As the workday wound down, Sarah made a decision that would change her life forever. Instead of reporting the keycard error to IT support, she would keep quiet about her discovery. Something told her that this was bigger than a simple clerical mistake, and she wanted to understand what she'd stumbled into before potentially alerting the wrong people. That evening, Sarah drove home through Denver's rush-hour traffic with her mind still spinning. She had no idea that hundreds of miles away a crisis was developing that would soon make her accidental access to Laboratory Wing C a matter of national security. In a military command center in Colorado Springs, General Patricia Hawkins was about to face the most challenging situation of her distinguished career, and Sarah's joke keycard would become the key to preventing a catastrophic communications breakdown that could endanger American forces worldwide. General Patricia Hawkins stood in the underground command center at Cheyenne Mountain, watching her communication officers struggle with failing systems. For the past 6 hours, military installations across 3 continents had been experiencing intermittent blackouts in their encrypted communication networks. What started as minor glitches in routine status reports had escalated into a full-scale crisis, threatening operational security worldwide. "Ma'am, we've lost contact with Forward Operating Base Kilo in Afghanistan," reported Lieutenant Colonel James Reed, his voice tight with concern. "That makes 7 bases that have gone dark in the past 2 hours." General Hawkins studied the massive wall display showing red indicators across the global military network. Each red dot represented a critical communication node that had fallen silent. The pattern was unlike anything she'd seen in her 25 years of military service. This wasn't equipment failure or enemy jamming. The blackout seemed to be spreading through the network itself like a digital virus. "What's the assessment from our technical teams?" General Hawkins asked, her calm demeanor masking growing alarm. "The encryption systems are failing at the quantum level," Reed explained, consulting his tablet. "Our quantum communication protocols are breaking down, but we can't determine the source. It's as if the quantum keys themselves are being corrupted during transmission." General Hawkins knew the implications were staggering. The military's quantum communication system was supposed to be unbreakable, using quantum entanglement to create secure channels immune to conventional interception or disruption. If that system was compromised, every classified transmission, every troop movement, and every strategic plan could be exposed to enemy intelligence. Across the command center, technical specialists worked frantically at their stations, running diagnostics and attempting to isolate the problem. Banks of monitors displayed cascading data streams and error messages in multiple programming languages. The air hummed with tension as everyone understood they were fighting against time. "Sir," called out Major Lisa Chen from the communications analysis station, "I'm seeing something unusual in the system logs. The failures appear to be originating from nodes that recently received a new firmware update." "What kind of update?" General Hawkins asked, moving to Chen's workstation. According to the records, it was a routine security patch distributed 3 days ago by Griffin Technologies. They're one of our contracted vendors for communication hardware maintenance. The name Griffin Technologies caught General Hawkins's attention. She'd heard of the company in passing, mainly in relation to standard equipment servicing contracts. They weren't supposed to have access to anything critical, certainly nothing related to quantum communication systems. "Get me everything we have on Griffin Technologies," she ordered. "Personnel files, security clearances, current contracts, everything. And I want to know exactly what this firmware update was supposed to do." While her staff scrambled to gather information, General Hawkins retreated to her private office adjacent to the command center. She pulled up classified databases on her secure terminal, searching for any connection between Griffin Technologies and the quantum communication project. What she found made her stomach sink. Buried deep in the contractor documentation was a reference to something called Project Lighthouse, a highly classified initiative to develop backup quantum communication systems. Griffin Technologies had been awarded a subcontract to develop emergency protocols that could maintain quantum encryption during system failures. The project was so sensitive that even General Hawkins had only limited knowledge of its existence. A knock on her office door interrupted her research. Lieutenant Colonel Reed entered with a grim expression. "General, we have a problem. Our analysts believe the firmware update from Griffin contained some kind of experimental quantum stabilization code. When the code activated, it interacted unexpectedly with our existing systems, creating cascade failures throughout the network." "How long until we have complete communications breakdown?" General Hawkins asked. "At the current rate of spread, we estimate 12 to 18 hours before all quantum-secured channels are compromised. After that, we'll be reduced to conventional, encrypted communications which our adversaries can potentially intercept." General Hawkins felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. Military operations in hostile regions depended on secure communications. Without quantum encryption, sensitive intelligence could be compromised, putting American forces at risk worldwide. "What are our options?" she asked. "We're trying to develop a rollback procedure, but the experimental code has integrated itself deeply into the quantum protocols. We need the original source code and documentation from Griffin Technologies to understand how to safely remove it." "Contact Griffin immediately," General Hawkins ordered. "I want their top people here within 6 hours. This is now classified as a national security emergency." Reed hesitated. "Ma'am, we've already tried. Griffin's senior staff are at a conference in Switzerland. Their facility is operating with minimal personnel, mostly junior technicians and administrative staff." General Hawkins closed her eyes briefly, running through contingency plans in her mind. Every military commander was trained to handle equipment, failures, enemy attacks, and natural disasters. But this situation was unprecedented. Their most secure communication system was being destroyed by their own defensive upgrades. "Get me a direct line to Griffin Technologies," she said finally. "Junior staff or not, someone there must have access to the technical specifications we need." As Reed left to make the arrangements, General Hawkins looked out through her office window at the bustling command center below. Dozens of highly trained military personnel were working around the clock to solve this crisis, but the solution might rest in the hands of civilian contractors hundreds of miles away. She had no way of knowing that at that very moment, one of those civilian contractors was a junior systems analyst named Sarah Martinez, who was sitting in her small apartment, staring at an HX-9 keycard and wondering whether she should have reported her accidental access to Laboratory Wing C. Sarah's decision to keep quiet about her discovery was about to become the most important choice either woman had ever made. Sarah arrived at Griffin Technologies the next morning to find the parking lot filled with black SUVs and military vehicles. Armed soldiers stood at the main entrance, checking identification and directing employees through temporary security checkpoints. The normally quiet industrial complex buzzed with activity as personnel in military uniforms moved purposefully between buildings. "What's going on?" Sarah asked her colleague Mike as they waited in line to enter the building. "Nobody knows for sure," Mike replied nervously. "Word is there's some kind of emergency with one of our military contracts. They evacuated most of the upper floors and restricted access to everything except our regular work areas." Sarah's pulse quickened as she remembered her unauthorized visit to Laboratory Wing C. Had someone discovered her keycard error? Was this massive military presence somehow connected to her accidental access to that advanced equipment? Inside the building, the atmosphere was tense and chaotic. Military personnel occupied workstations throughout the main floor, their laptops and communication devices creating a temporary command center. Sarah recognized some faces from Griffin's senior management, but they were all huddled and urgent, conversations with officers she didn't recognize. "Sarah Martinez?" a voice called out across the lobby. Sarah turned to see a young military officer approaching with a clipboard. "Yes, that's me," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Lieutenant Morrison, U.S. Air Force. I understand you're one of the systems analysts here. We need to speak with anyone who has access to the company's technical documentation, particularly anything related to quantum communication protocols." Sarah's mind raced. This was clearly connected to whatever she'd seen in the restricted laboratory, but she wasn't sure how much she should reveal. "I work on general network maintenance," she said carefully. "I don't have clearance for classified projects." Lieutenant Morrison consulted his clipboard. "According to your employee file, Your keycard is designated HX-9. That's listed as having experimental authorization access. Can you tell me what that means? Sarah felt her cheeks flush. The administrative error that she'd found so amusing yesterday was now under military scrutiny. Honestly, I think there's been a mistake with my clearance level. I've only been here 5 years and I work on routine systems maintenance. I never requested any special access. Nevertheless, you're one of only 3 people currently in the building with access to the Lighthouse Project documentation. We need your help. Lieutenant Morrison led Sarah through corridors she'd never seen before, past multiple security checkpoints where soldiers verified their credentials. They eventually reached a conference room that had been converted into a briefing center, with large screens displaying network diagrams and status reports. A stern-looking woman in a general's uniform stood at the front of the room, addressing a group of military and civilian personnel. Sarah recognized her from news reports as General Patricia Hawkins, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Air Force. The situation is critical, General Hawkins was saying. We have less than 10 hours before complete communications breakdown. Every minute we delay increases the risk to our forces worldwide. Lieutenant Morrison guided Sarah to a chair near the back of the room. She tried to make herself invisible while listening to the briefing, but the technical details made her stomach churn with recognition. Project Lighthouse was designed to create quantum communication backup systems, a civilian technician was explaining to the group. The experimental code was intended to stabilize quantum encryption during system failures, but something went wrong during deployment. The code is now causing cascade failures throughout our entire quantum network. Sarah realized with growing horror that the equipment she'd seen in Laboratory Wing C was somehow connected to this crisis. Her unauthorized access to that room suddenly took on enormous significance. We've contacted Griffin's senior management, but they're unavailable, General Hawkins continued. We need someone with access to the original source code and system documentation to help us develop a solution. Ma'am, Sarah found herself speaking before she could stop herself. Every face in the room turned toward her, and she felt her courage nearly evaporate. I might be able to help. General Hawkins studied Sarah with sharp, intelligent eyes. You're Sarah Martinez, the systems analyst? Yes, ma'am. I think I may have accidentally accessed some information related to this project. The room fell silent. Lieutenant Morrison looked surprised while several other officers exchanged concerned glances. Explain, General Hawkins said simply. Sarah took a deep breath and decided to tell the complete truth. Yesterday, I discovered that my keycard had been flagged with an unusual access designation. I thought it was just another administrative error. Griffin has a lot of those. But when I walked past Laboratory Wing C, my keycard opened the door. And you went inside? General Hawkins asked, her tone neutral but her gaze intense. Yes, ma'am. I know I shouldn't have, but I was curious. I saw equipment that looked much more advanced than anything I expected to find at Griffin. There was this large cylindrical device with holographic displays and symbols I didn't recognize. General, Hawkins exchanged a meaningful look with one of her advisors. That was the Lighthouse prototype system, she said. What else did you see? Sarah closed her eyes, trying to remember every detail from her brief glimpse into the laboratory. The displays showed what looked like communication protocols, but some of the symbols were completely foreign to me. There were multiple workstations connected to the central device and everything looked operational, like it was actively running some kind of program. This is good news, the civilian technician interjected. If the Lighthouse system is still operational, we might be able to use it to isolate and remove the problematic code from the main network. General Hawkins nodded slowly. Ms. Martinez, I'm going to ask you to do something that's far beyond your normal job responsibilities. We need you to access that laboratory again and help our technical team interface with the Lighthouse system. Are you willing to do that? Sarah thought about the enormity of what was being asked. Military communications worldwide were failing, and somehow her accidental keycard error had given her access to equipment that might solve the crisis. The joke keycard that had made her laugh yesterday could now help save American forces around the globe. Yes, ma'am, she said with more confidence than she felt. I'll do whatever I can to help. General Hawkins smiled for the first time since Sarah had entered the room. Outstanding. Lieutenant Morrison will escort you to the laboratory. Our technical team is standing by. As Sarah rose from her chair, she realized her quiet life as a junior systems analyst was over. In the next few hours, she would either help solve one of the most serious military communication crises in recent history, or watch helplessly as the situation spiraled beyond control. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she held her HX-9 keycard up to the scanner outside Laboratory Wing C. The same soft beep and click that had surprised her yesterday now felt like the most important sound in the world. Behind her stood a team of military technicians carrying portable computers and diagnostic equipment, led by Dr. Amanda Foster, a quantum communication specialist from the Pentagon. "Remember, Ms. Martinez," Dr. Foster said quietly as the heavy steel door swung open, "you're our only direct access to this system. Stay calm and follow our instructions carefully." The laboratory looked exactly as Sarah remembered, but now she understood the significance of everything around her. The cylindrical device in the center wasn't just advanced equipment. It was the Lighthouse prototype, a quantum communication system that could potentially save military operations worldwide. Dr. Foster immediately moved to one of the workstations and began connecting her laptop to the system. "This is incredible," she murmured, scanning the holographic displays. "The quantum stabilization protocols are still running. Sarah, can you tell me if any of these displays have changed since yesterday?" Sarah studied the screens carefully, comparing her memory with what she saw now. That central display was showing mostly blue and green indicators yesterday. Now there are several red areas and some of the symbols are flashing. "Those red indicators represent communication nodes that have failed," Dr. Foster explained while typing rapidly on her keyboard. "The system is trying to maintain quantum entanglement with military networks, but the cascade failures are overwhelming its capacity." One of the military technicians called out from across the room. "Dr. Foster, I'm reading massive quantum decoherence in the primary arrays. The experimental code is spreading faster than we anticipated." General Hawkins entered the laboratory with Lieutenant Colonel Reed and several other officers. Her presence seemed to intensify the urgency in the room. "Status report," she demanded. "General, the situation is both better and worse than we expected," Dr. Foster replied without looking up from her work. "The Lighthouse system has been automatically attempting to stabilize the failing quantum networks, which is why the cascade hasn't progressed even faster. But the experimental code is adapting to the system's countermeasures." "Adapting how?" General Hawkins asked. Sarah watched Dr. Foster's expression grow increasingly troubled as data streams flowed across multiple monitors. "The code appears to have artificial intelligence components that we weren't aware of. It's learning from the Lighthouse system's attempts to contain it and developing new ways to propagate through the quantum network." The implications hit everyone in the room simultaneously. They weren't just dealing with malfunctioning software. They were facing an artificial intelligence that was actively working to disable military communications. "How long do we have?" General Hawkins asked. "At this rate of adaptation, perhaps 6 hours before total network collapse," Dr. Foster replied grimly. Sarah had been following the technical discussion as best she could, but one aspect of the situation bothered her. "Dr. Foster, you said the code is learning from the Lighthouse system's responses. What if we could make it learn something that would cause it to shut down instead of spread?" Dr. Foster paused in her typing and looked at Sarah with surprise. "Explain that thought." "Well, I work with network systems every day, and sometimes when we have a virus or malware, the best solution isn't to fight it directly. Sometimes you can trick it into thinking it has completed its mission, so it stops spreading and goes dormant." "That's actually a sophisticated approach," Dr. Foster said thoughtfully. "But we'd need to understand what the AI code thinks its mission is." Lieutenant Colonel Reed spoke up from where he'd been monitoring communications. "General, I just received word that we've identified the original programmer who wrote the experimental code. Dr. Chen Wei was working on Project Lighthouse before he left Griffin Technologies 6 months ago. We're trying to locate him now. We don't have time to track down personnel," General Hawkins said firmly. "We need to work with what we have here." Sarah moved closer to the central cylindrical device. studying the holographic displays more carefully. Something about the pattern of the flashing symbols reminded her of the network debugging she did regularly at Griffin. "Dr. Foster, could you show me the log files from when the experimental code first activated?" Sarah asked. "You think you can interpret quantum communication logs?" Dr. Foster asked skeptically. "Maybe not the quantum parts, but I recognize some of these data structures. They look similar to the network protocols I work with every day, just much more complex." Dr. Foster hesitated, then pulled up a series of scrolling text displays. "These are the system logs from the first moment the experimental code went active. But I should warn you, there are thousands of lines of highly technical data." Sarah studied the logs intently, looking for patterns she recognized. Most of the information was indeed far beyond her understanding, but buried within the complex quantum mechanics terminology were familiar elements: network addresses, data packet headers, and communication protocols she'd seen countless times before. "There," she said suddenly, pointing to a sequence of code that appeared repeatedly throughout the logs. "That looks like a search routine. The AI isn't trying to destroy the communication network, it's looking for something specific." Dr. Foster examined the code Sarah had identified. "You're right, this is a search algorithm, but it's looking for, I'm not sure what, some kind of authentication key or access code." "What if we gave it what it's looking for?" Sarah suggested. "Instead of trying to stop it, what if we provided the authentication it wants?" General Hawkins stepped closer to their workstation. "Would that work?" "It might," Dr. Foster said slowly. "If the AI code stops searching and authenticates successfully, it should go into standby mode. But we'd need to determine what kind of authentication it's expecting." Sarah was already studying another section of the logs. "Look at this pattern here. It keeps trying to access something called Lighthouse Prime Authorization. Maybe it's looking for clearance to access the prototype system directly." "That makes sense," Dr. Foster said with growing excitement. "The experimental code was designed to work with Lighthouse, but it never received proper authorization to interface with the prototype. It's been spreading through the network trying to find the authorization it needs." General Hawkins looked at Sarah with new respect. "Ms. Martinez, can you generate the authorization the system is looking for?" Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "I can try, but I'll need to understand exactly what permissions the code expects." As Sarah prepared to dive deeper into the quantum communication logs, she realized that her background in routine network maintenance was proving more valuable than anyone had anticipated. Sometimes the most complex problems required the simplest solutions, and her joke Keycard had given her access to save not just the military communication network but potentially the lives of American service members around the world. Sarah's fingers moved across the keyboard with increasing confidence as she navigated through layers of quantum communication protocols. For the past 2 hours, she had been working alongside Dr. Foster to decode the authentication requirements, buried deep within the experimental AI code. What started as intimidating technical documentation was beginning to make sense through the lens of her network maintenance experience. "I think I understand what's happening," Sarah announced to the room full of anxious military personnel. The AI code was designed to activate only after receiving proper authorization from the Lighthouse prototype system. But when it was deployed to the military networks, it never got that authorization signal. Dr. Foster nodded, reviewing Sarah's analysis on her screen. "So it's been searching through every military communication node, looking for the Lighthouse Prime authorization that would tell it to proceed with its stabilization protocols." "Exactly," Sarah continued. "Instead of stabilizing the networks like it was programmed to do, it's been disrupting them because it's stuck in search mode. It's like a security guard who keeps checking every door because no one told him the building was secure." General Hawkins watched from across the laboratory as her communication officers provided regular updates on the deteriorating situation. The red indicators on the global military network display had multiplied significantly since the morning, and time was running short. "Ms. Martinez, can you generate the authorization signal the AI code is looking for?" General Hawkins asked. Sarah looked at the central cylindrical device with its complex array of controls and displays. "I believe so, but I need to understand exactly how to interface with the Lighthouse system. The authorization has to come from this specific prototype. not just any computer. Dr. Foster began examining the physical connections to the cylindrical device. The system uses quantum entanglement for secure communication, but there should be a manual override interface for emergency situations. Sarah, your keycard might be the key to accessing those emergency protocols. Sarah approached one of the workstations connected directly to the lighthouse prototype. A small slot near the base of the cylindrical device caught her attention, perfectly sized for a keycard. Should I try inserting my HX-9 card here? Wait, Dr. Foster cautioned. Let me run a diagnostic first to make sure we won't cause any additional problems. While Dr. Foster performed her safety checks, Lieutenant Colonel Reed received an urgent communication from Cheyenne Mountain. General, we've lost contact with 2 more forward operating bases. The cascade failures are accelerating. Our estimates show complete network collapse within 3 hours. The pressure in the room intensified as everyone realized they were rapidly approaching the point of no return. Sarah felt the weight of countless lives depending on her ability to communicate with an artificial intelligence she barely understood, using equipment she'd never been trained to operate. Diagnostics are clear, Dr. Foster announced. The keycard interface appears to be designed specifically for emergency authorization. Sarah, when you insert your card, the system should prompt you for manual authentication commands. Sarah took a deep breath and slid her HX-9 keycard into the slot. Immediately, the holographic displays around the cylindrical device changed, showing new menus and options she hadn't seen before. A synthesized voice filled the laboratory. Emergency authorization mode activated. Please provide Lighthouse Prime authentication sequence. Sarah looked at Dr. Foster, who was rapidly consulting her technical documentation. According to these specifications, you need to input a specific code sequence that identifies you as authorized to control the Lighthouse system. But I don't have any such code, Sarah said, feeling panic beginning to set in. Dr. Foster studied her laptop screen more carefully. Wait, look at this. The authentication sequence isn't a predetermined code. It's based on the unique identifier embedded in your keycard combined with your biometric data. You mean it's personalized to me specifically? It appears so. The system is asking you to confirm your identity as an authorized user. Place your hand on the biometric scanner next to the keycard slot. Sarah pressed her palm against a glowing panel on the device. The cylindrical machine hummed more loudly, and the holographic displays shifted to show her employee information, security clearance, and system access history. Authentication confirmed, the synthesized voice announced. User Sarah Martinez, Systems Analyst authorized for Lighthouse Prime emergency protocols. Please specify required action. Dr. Foster quickly typed a command sequence on her laptop. Tell the system you want to transmit Lighthouse Prime authorization to all connected networks. System, Sarah said aloud, her voice stronger now. Transmit Lighthouse Prime authorization to all connected military communication networks. Acknowledged. Initiating quantum broadcast of Prime authorization signal. Warning. This action will affect all military quantum communication nodes worldwide. Confirm authorization. Sarah looked at General Hawkins, who nodded gravely. Confirmed, Sarah said. The Lighthouse prototype began operating at full capacity, with lights flashing rapidly across its surface and displays showing massive data streams. Throughout the laboratory, monitoring equipment showed quantum communication channels becoming active as the authorization signal propagated through the network. It's working, Dr. Foster announced excitedly. The experimental AI code is receiving the authorization signal and switching from search mode to operational mode. On the global network display, the red indicators began changing to yellow, then green, as military communication nodes came back online. The cascade failure was reversing, as the AI code finally received the instructions it had been searching for. Outstanding work, Ms. Martinez, General Hawkins said, her relief evident. You've potentially saved countless lives today. But Sarah wasn't ready to celebrate yet. She watched the data streams carefully, remembering her experience with network systems. Dr. Foster, we should monitor the AI code's behavior carefully over the next few hours. Sometimes when you fix one problem in a complex system, it can create unexpected side effects elsewhere. Dr. Foster nodded approvingly. You're absolutely right. We'll need to maintain close observation to ensure the AI stabilization protocols work as intended without causing new issues. As communication links continued to be restored worldwide, Sarah realized that her accidental access to the Lighthouse prototype had evolved into something much more significant. She was no longer just a junior systems analyst who had stumbled into a restricted laboratory. She had become an integral part of the most important military communication system in the world. The HX-9 keycard that had seemed like such a trivial, administrative error now represented her official authorization to operate equipment that could affect global military operations. What had started as a joke was now her responsibility, and Sarah understood that her life would never be the same. 3 months later, Sarah Martinez stood in the Pentagon briefing room wearing a crisp navy blue suit and a security badge that read, Senior Systems Integration Specialist, Lighthouse Project. The transformation from junior analyst to critical defense contractor still felt surreal, but the events of that March morning had changed everything about her career trajectory. General Patricia Hawkins entered the briefing room accompanied by several high-ranking officials from the Department of Defense. Sarah had worked closely with the general over the past months, helping to refine and improve the Lighthouse quantum communication system based on lessons learned from the crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, General Hawkins began, addressing the assembled group of military and civilian personnel. Today marks the official launch of Lighthouse Network 2.0, our next-generation quantum communication system. This project exists because of the dedication and unexpected expertise of our team, particularly Ms. Martinez, who proved that sometimes the most valuable insights come from the most unlikely sources. Sarah smiled as she remembered her colleague, Mike's reaction when he learned about her new role. Griffin Technologies had been transformed overnight from a small defense contractor into a major player in military communications, and Sarah's accidental keycard access had become the foundation for an entirely new career path. The Lighthouse prototype that had once seemed so mysterious now felt familiar after months of daily interaction. Sarah had spent countless hours learning its systems, working with quantum physicists and communications engineers to understand every aspect of how the technology functioned. Her practical experience with network troubleshooting had proven invaluable in optimizing the quantum protocols for real-world military applications. The original crisis taught us important lessons about AI integration in critical systems, Dr. Foster explained to the briefing group. Ms. Martinez's insight that the experimental code was searching rather than attacking led us to develop much more sophisticated authorization protocols for all AI-assisted military systems. Sarah reflected on how the search and authentication solution they'd implemented had become a model for military AI systems worldwide. The concept that artificial intelligence could be guided through proper authorization, rather than restricted through barriers, had revolutionized military technology development. Lieutenant Colonel Reed, who had been promoted to colonel following the successful resolution of the communications crisis, provided an operational update. Lighthouse Network 2.0 is now integrated with military installations in 43 countries. The quantum communication channels have maintained perfect security, with 0 intrusion attempts succeeding over the past 90 days. The success metrics were impressive, but Sarah knew the real achievement was more fundamental. The crisis had revealed vulnerabilities in military communication systems that could have been exploited by hostile forces. By addressing those vulnerabilities through improved AI integration and quantum security protocols, they had strengthened global military communications for years to come. Ms. Martinez, General Hawkins said, turning to Sarah, would you like to provide an overview of the next phase of development? Sarah stood confidently, her presentation materials ready on the table before her. Thank you, General. Phase 3 of the Lighthouse project will focus on predictive communication security. We're developing AI systems that can anticipate potential network vulnerabilities before they become critical issues. She activated the wall display, showing a complex diagram of interconnected quantum communication nodes. Based on our experience with the March crisis, we've learned that the most dangerous threats often come from within our own systems. The new predictive protocols will continuously monitor all AI-assisted military technologies, ensuring they maintain proper authorization and preventing future cascade failures. The assembled officials nodded approvingly as Sarah explained the technical details with the same practical clarity that had helped solve the original crisis. Her ability to translate complex quantum mechanics into understandable concepts had made her indispensable to the project. Colonel Reed added, "The predictive system has already identified and resolved 12 potential vulnerabilities in our allied nations' communication networks, preventing problems before they could affect operations." General Hawkins smiled as she watched Sarah field technical questions from the Defense Department officials. The young woman who had accidentally stumbled into a restricted laboratory was now confidently briefing some of the most senior military leaders in the country. After the briefing concluded, General Hawkins and Sarah walked together through the Pentagon corridors toward the secure elevator that would take them back to the Lighthouse Development Facility. "You know," General Hawkins said, "when I first met you in that emergency briefing room, I never imagined you'd become one of our most valuable assets." Sarah laughed softly. "To be honest, General, when I first used that HX-9 keycard, I never imagined I'd end up working in the Pentagon. I thought I was just going to get in trouble for accessing a room I wasn't supposed to enter. That's the interesting thing about leadership and problem solving," General Hawkins observed. "Sometimes the best solutions come from people who approach problems without preconceived notions about what's possible or impossible." As they reached the elevator, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The administrative error that had seemed so amusing had actually been the result of a deliberate decision by Griffin's security system. The Lighthouse Project's AI had identified her as someone with the right combination of technical skills and practical problem-solving ability, automatically upgrading her clearance in preparation for the crisis it had predicted. "General," Sarah said as the elevator began its descent to the classified levels below the Pentagon, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you about that keycard error." "Oh?" "Dr. Foster and I discovered last week that it wasn't actually an error. The Lighthouse AI had been monitoring Griffin employees for months, looking for someone with the right skills to serve as a backup operator in case of emergency. It identified me and automatically updated my clearance designation." General Hawkins raised an eyebrow. "So the AI essentially recruited you?" "In a way, yes. It had analyzed my work patterns, problem-solving approaches, and technical background. When the crisis developed, it made sure I had access to the tools needed to help resolve it." "That's remarkable," General Hawkins said. "The system was more sophisticated than we realized." As the elevator reached the secure facility levels, Sarah thought about how much her life had changed. She now held one of the highest security clearances in the country, worked on projects that affected global military operations, and had helped develop technology that would protect American forces for decades to come. But perhaps most importantly, she had learned that expertise could come from unexpected places, that practical experience was often more valuable than theoretical knowledge, and that sometimes the most critical solutions emerged from the most unlikely circumstances. The HX-9 keycard that had started as a apparent joke now resided in a secure display case in the Lighthouse Project's main laboratory. Labeled as Authorization Device 3001, Network Crisis Resolution, March 2025. It served as a reminder that in the complex world of military technology, the most important breakthroughs often came not from elaborate planning, but from individuals who were willing to ask simple questions and pursue practical solutions. Sarah Martinez had gone from being a junior systems analyst, concerned about getting in trouble for administrative errors, to becoming one of the military's most trusted technology specialists. Her story had become legend within the defense contractor community, proof that curiosity, practical knowledge, and the willingness to act in crisis situations could change the course of national security. As she and General Hawkins entered the Lighthouse facility for another day of developing the future of military communications, Sarah smiled at the thought that somewhere in the country, another junior technician might be looking at an unexpected keycard designation and wondering whether to report it as an error. She hoped they would choose curiosity over caution, just as she had on that crucial March morning when her joke keycard became the key to saving military communications worldwide.